I only went downstairs for a glass of water at 3 in the morning. Under the dim under-cabinet lights, my husband, Brett, was on his knees with the cooktop dismantled, exposing naked wires like a copper ribcage. He looked up, smiling that perfect smile, and lied so smoothly about a short circuit. But the glint of fresh wire cutters in his hand told me the truth. He was not fixing our kitchen. He was building a trap. My name is Sloane Mercer, and at 34 years old, living in the wealthy quiet of Bracken Cove, Virginia, I thought I knew exactly what my life was. It was a series of comfortable routines and expensive silences. That illusion shattered at 3 in the morning. A sudden, clawing thirst woke me up, dragging me out of a dreamless sleep. I left the warmth of the master suite and walked down the hallway, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my footsteps. The kitchen was freezing. The overhead lights were off, but the under-cabinet LEDs cast a sickly yellow glow across the limestone floor. I stopped dead at the entrance. My husband, Brett Halstead, was kneeling in front of the induction cooktop. He had lifted the black glass surface completely off the counter. The appliance looked like a dissected animal. Red and blue wires spilled out from the chassis, exposing the ugly industrial guts of the machine. Brett jerked his head up. For a second, his face was a mask of pure, adrenaline-fueled panic. Then, the mask slipped back into place. He smiled, that easy, charming smile that had won over my father. "Hey, sorry. Did I wake you?" Brett asked, his voice smooth. The stove was acting up. I thought I smelled burning plastic earlier, so I came down to check. Just a short circuit. I'm fixing it so you don't have to worry. As he spoke, his left hand slid casually over a small Ziploc bag on the floor. He tried to be subtle, but I saw the glint of metal screws and something else inside it. A small green square. It looked like a microchip. It certainly did not look like a standard replacement part. I looked at his hands. He was wearing blue nitrile gloves. Beside him sat a set of wire strippers and a high-voltage screwdriver. The rubber handles were pristine, untouched by grease or wear. They were brand new. "You're fixing electrical wiring." In the middle of the night, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Brett stood up, peeling off the gloves with a sharp snap. He walked over to the fridge. "Don't turn on the main power switch." "Okay, I have the breaker off," he said. He filled a glass from the dispenser and handed it to me. His movements were slow and deliberate, like he was calming a spooked animal. I took the glass. His fingers brushed mine. They were cold. He looked me in the eyes, and for the first time in 4 years of marriage, I did not see warmth. I saw calculation. He was assessing me. I took a sip, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I walked toward the trash compactor to throw away a napkin I had grabbed. The lid was slightly ajar. Right on top, sitting on yesterday's coffee grounds, was a crumpled cardboard box. It was packaging for high-end electronics. The shipping label had been ripped off, but not completely. The spot where the return address should have been was scraped raw. I turned back toward the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to get away from him. Sloane Brett called out softly. I froze with my hand on the banister. "You go to sleep," he said. "Tomorrow morning. Everything will be fine." It did not sound like a promise. It sounded like a warning. I went back to bed, but I did not sleep. I lay rigid under the duvet, staring at the ceiling fan. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and tapped the voice recorder app, sliding it under my pillow. Downstairs, the sounds continued, heavy footsteps. The metallic clack of tools. Then, the distinct thud of the breaker box panel in the utility room being slammed shut. He was not fumbling. He moved with a rhythmic, terrifying competence. An hour later, silence fell. I waited until I heard his breathing even out beside me before I crept back into the hallway. I needed to verify something. I went down to the kitchen door, the one leading to the garage. I reached for the latch. my fingers seeking the familiar groove of the deadbolt we had installed when we moved in. My hand met smooth metal. I frowned in the dark. The thumb turn was different. It was vertical, heavy, and brand new. Brett had changed the locks on the inside of our own house. And he had never told me. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like roasted coffee and denial. Brett was standing by the island, buttoning his cuffs, looking as pristine as a magazine cover. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, his cologne masking the faint, lingering scent of ozone. "Morning, babe. Coffee is ready," he said, "and do not worry about the stove. It is all safe now." I looked at the cooktop. The black glass surface was sealed down tight with a thick, heavy line of black silicone. It did not look like a repair. It looked like he had closed the lid on a coffin. When the garage door finally rumbled shut, signaling he had left, I dropped to my knees. I opened the cabinet underneath the cooktop. The smell hit me instantly. Burnt plastic. I reached in and touched the wires he had worked on. They were not secured. The insulation was stripped back way too far, leaving copper exposed, and the connections were wrapped in cheap electrical tape that was already peeling. It was sloppy. It was dangerous. It was intentional. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. I pulled it out. It was a security alert from our bank. Recovery email for joint checking ending in 409 changed at 3:12 in the morning. My blood ran cold. 3:12. That was exactly the moment I had been standing in this kitchen, watching him hold that screwdriver. I texted him immediately, my fingers trembling. "Did you change our bank settings last night?" His reply came within seconds, cheerful and completely dismissive. "Just spam. Honey, ignore it. Focus on getting ready for tonight. The Ridgevale Gala is huge for us." He was gaslighting me via text message. I grabbed my purse and drove to work, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see his silver sedan. I worked at Northkite Insights Lab, a small market research firm where facts were supposed to matter. But today, the world felt tilted. "Hey, Sloan," Jenna, the front desk admin, called out as I walked in. "Weird question, but did you call the automated system late last night, like, really late?" I stopped at her desk. "No." "Why someone called in to verify your digital signature key," Jenna said, frowning. "Sounded just like you, but flat. Like a recording. I thought maybe you were sick." I felt the air leave my lungs. I rushed to my cubicle and opened my laptop. I pulled up the security logs for our home network. My stomach twisted into a knot. There was a remote login session recorded on my personal cloud drive. The location tag was not the office. It was home, master bedroom. The timestamp was 2 hours ago, while I was in the shower. I checked the download history. 3 files had been accessed: medical power of attorney, life insurance beneficiary amendment, and asset transfer authorization. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the screen. I did not trust the cloud anymore. I composed a new email to an old account I had not used since college and attached the images. I hit send. The moment the progress bar hit 100%, my phone disconnected from the office Wi-Fi. A notification popped up: home network offline. I checked the app for the hallway camera. Signal lost. He was scrubbing the digital footprint. He knew I was looking. I left work early, pleading a migraine. When I got home, a familiar car was in the driveway. Lorraine, my mother-in-law, was standing in the kitchen. She was staring at the stove with the intense scrutiny of a structural engineer assessing a demolition site. She did not hear me come in. "It needs to look natural," she whispered to the empty room. "Lorraine," I said loudly. She spun around, her face smoothing instantly into a polite, plastic veneer. "Sloan, you startled me. I just let myself in to drop off that dress for tonight." She walked over and patted my arm. Her hand felt heavy and cold. She glanced back at the cooktop, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Be careful with these old appliances, dear. Houses sometimes. Well, they just catch fire unexpectedly." She left before I could scream. I walked over to the mail pile on the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was a thick envelope from our insurance provider. I tore it open. It was a policy update confirmation. The coverage for accidental fire and total loss had been doubled effective last week. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature in blue ink. It read, Sloan Mercer. I had never seen that document in my life. Staring at that forged signature, the paper trembling in my hands, I felt the last 4 years of my life collapse into a singular, terrifying picture. It was not a sudden accident. It was a slow, surgical dismantling of who I was. I went back to the beginning, 4 years ago, when I met Brett. I was a ghost. My mother had just died, and I was drifting through days of gray fog. Brett appeared like a lighthouse. He was ambitious, sure, but he felt warm. He wrapped me in a coat of security that I desperately needed. He told me he would handle everything, and I let him. I did not see that handling everything was actually taking everything. The erosion started with tiny scratches. He began to edit my reality. If I mentioned he was late, or that his tone was sharp, he would look at me with pity, not anger. Sloan, honey, you are doing that thing again, he would say, his voice low and concerned. You are so sensitive lately. You are imagining malice where there is only love. It is exhausting, and I would apologize. I would actually apologize to him for catching him in a lie. I trained myself to swallow my instincts because he convinced me they were broken. Then came the paperwork. It was a ritual. He would slide stacks of documents across the kitchen island, always at the worst times. He did it when I was just walking in the door after a 10-hour shift, or when my head was pounding from a migraine, or right before we turned off the lights to sleep. Just tax optimizations. Babe, he would say, handing me a pen and tapping the line. Do not bore yourself with the legal jargon. It is just to save us a few $1,000s. I signed away my autonomy, one fatigue-induced scribble at a time. His mother, Lorraine, was the architect of my insecurity. She never raised her voice. She used compliments that felt like cuts. I remembered a lunch we had 6 months after the wedding. She reached across the table and patted my hand. You are so lucky. Sloan. She had purred. You are good at enduring things. You are perfect for the background. Most women need to be the star, but you are happy just to support Brett. It is quaint. Every time she spoke, I felt myself shrinking. I became smaller, quieter, trying to fit into the little box they had built for me. And as I shrank, my world emptied. I used to have friends from college. I used to go to happy hour. But Brett started finding ways to interject. They are just jealous of the house. Sloan, he would whisper after a dinner party. Did you hear how they talked down to you? I only stepped in to protect you. Or he would cause a scene, a small, embarrassing, calculated moment that made me look unstable, and then he would drag me home to soothe me. Eventually, it was easier to just not go out. I looked around the living room, realizing how foreign my own home felt. Brett had an obsession with fixing things, but he had a rule. He only did repairs when I was not there. I would come home from a grocery run to find the dishwasher had new buttons, or the thermostat had been replaced. It was rattling, he would say. I fixed it. I never saw the broken part. I only saw the new, shiny result that I did not understand how to use. Then came the smart home upgrade last winter. He sold it as a safety feature for me. It is for your protection. Sloan. He had insisted, I can check the cameras, lock the doors, and monitor the electricity even when I am traveling. I had thought it was romantic. Now, standing in the cold light of the afternoon, I realized what it actually was. It was a cage. He controlled the locks. He controlled the eyes in the ceiling. He controlled the very current running through the walls. My eyes fell on the tablet on the coffee table. I remembered the day he convinced me to set up a digital signature. Why cramp your hand signing checks? He had laughed. leaning against the doorframe. "Upload your signature. It is the future. It is convenient." I had done it. I had handed him the ability to become me. And he had used that ghost of my hand to increase the payout on my life. I dropped the insurance policy onto the counter. The fear was still there, cold and sharp in my stomach, but something else was rising to meet it. It was clarity. I whispered the words to the empty room, testing them on my tongue. I am not crazy. I am not sensitive. I have been led to doubt myself. For the first time in 4 years, the voice in my head sounded like me, and she was furious. I waited until Brett's car disappeared around the curve of the driveway before I made the call. I did not call the company Brett used. I called an independent electrician named Miller, a guy with a rusted van and a reputation for honesty that I found on a neighborhood forum. Miller arrived in 20 minutes. When he popped the seal Brett had applied to the cooktop, the smell of burnt ozone wafted up again. Miller shone his flashlight into the mess of wires. He went still. "Jesus," he whispered. He looked up at me, his face pale under the grime. "Ma'am, this isn't a repair job," Miller said, his voice dropping low. "See this bridge here between the main relay and the ground that is a bypass, and this little chip. It is designed to override the thermal shutoff. If you turn this on high, it won't trip the breaker. It will just keep heating until the wires melt and the insulation catches. This is a staged accident." I felt like I was going to throw up, but I swallowed it down. "Can you document it? Can you prove it wasn't wear and tear?" "I will write you a full report right now," Miller said, pulling out a clipboard. "And I am taking this chip. You don't want this in your house." With the physical evidence in my pocket, I went to my laptop. I needed to follow the money. I logged into our joint account, scrolling past the mortgage payments and grocery bills. I found them. Small transfers, just under $500 each so they would not trigger a notification, going out every Friday to a business called Halstead Technical Consulting. I searched the business registry. It was a limited liability company formed exactly 2 months ago. The registered agent was a generic legal service, but the mailing address was a P.O. box in the next town over. Then, a stroke of luck hit me from the trash folder of my email. I was deleting spam when I saw a receipt from an electronics supplier. The subject line was Order Confirmation Digital Signature Emulator and Firmware Loader. The shipping address was our house, but the recipient name was Brett. He had bought the tools to forge my consent and hack our own appliances. My heart was racing so fast it hurt. I hacked into his cloud calendar, guessing the password was still his mother's birthday. I was right. I scrolled forward. Next Tuesday, 7 days from today. He had an appointment blocked out for 3 hours. The title of the event made my blood freeze. Property loss, appraisal and structural damage assessment. He had scheduled the cleanup for a fire that had not happened yet. I grabbed my keys and drove to the law offices of Harrison and Associates in town. I needed a shark. But when I walked in, the receptionist did not even let me sit down. She looked at me with a mix of pity and practiced dismissal. "Mrs. Halstead, I am so sorry," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We cannot take your case." "Your husband. Well, the firm has a conflict of interest, and we received a note that you two are pursuing amicable mediation." "I never agreed to mediation," I snapped. "I think you should go home." "Mrs. Halstead," she said softly, "you look overwrought. Blocked." He had blocked the exits. I was driving home, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, with a Richmond area code. "This is the Private Wealth Division of Dominion Trust," a formal female voice said. "We are trying to reach Sloan Mercer regarding the Mercer-Kincaid Trust. We flagged a recent inquiry about liquidating the principal assets and wanted to confirm security protocols. What I asked, confused. I don't know a Mercer-Kincaid Trust." "Oh," the voice hesitated. "Perhaps I have the wrong—" "Wait, is this the daughter of Evelyn Mercer?" Before I could answer, the front door of my house opened. Brett was standing there. He had come home early. He saw me in the driveway, phone to my ear. He walked straight to the car window. "Who are you talking to?" he asked. "A bank," I said, my voice trembling. "Something about a trust fund." Brett's face changed. The smooth mask cracked. He reached through the open window and snatched the phone from my hand. He looked at the screen, ended the call, and shoved the phone into his pocket. "You do not answer unknown numbers." "Sloan," he shouted. It was the first time he had raised his voice in public. "It is a scam. They fish for information. God, why are you so stupid about security?" He stormed into the house. I sat in the car, shaking. He was scared. The mention of the trust had scared him. I waited until he was in the shower. I went to the guest room closet and pulled down the old, battered keepsake box that belonged to my mother. I dug through the photos and the old jewelry until I found a bundle of letters she had written but never sent. I flipped through them until I found one in a blue envelope. It was addressed to a lawyer, but there was no name on the front. I pulled out the letter. It was short, vague, talking about protecting a future for me. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It wasn't my mother's name. It was just initials. C. K. Mercer Kincaid, C. K. I stared at the letters, and the pieces of the trap started to rearrange themselves. Brett wasn't just trying to kill me for the insurance money. He was trying to kill me to get to something much, much bigger. The chandeliers of the Bracken Cove Yacht Hall were blinding, refracting light into 1,000 jagged shards that pierced my headache. I walked into the room, but I felt less like a guest and more like a prop. Lorraine had insisted on this dress. It was a pale, washed-out beige silk that blended perfectly with the cream walls. She wanted me to disappear. She wanted me to be a ghost before I was even dead. Brett was already at the center of the room, holding court near the podium. He was the golden boy of Ridgevale Meridian Partners tonight, the man who could do no wrong. When he saw me, his eyes did not light up. They assessed me, checking to make sure the bruises on my soul were not yet visible on my skin. He waved me over, his grip on my waist firm and possessive. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have a moment." Brett's voice boomed through the speakers, silencing the chatter. He looked down at me with a performance of tender concern that made my stomach turn. "I want to thank my beautiful wife, Sloan. She has been struggling lately. The stress has been immense, and her health is fragile. But I promised her mother I would take care of her, and I intend to keep that promise." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. I tried to pull away, but his fingers dug into my hip bone. "Which is why," Brett continued, his voice dropping to a somber, responsible register, "we have made a difficult decision. Sloan needs rest, away from the pressures of managing our estate." He signaled to the side of the room. A man I did not know, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, stepped forward. This was Miles Quaid. I knew the name from the shadows of legal forums. He was a cleaner for the wealthy. He held out a thick envelope. "Mrs. Halstead," Quaid said, his voice flat and oily. "This is the executed copy of the asset protection agreement you authorized this morning. As agreed, for your own safety regarding the electrical instability at the residence, you have consented to vacate the property within 24 hours. "What I never signed," I started, my voice rising. "Sloan, honey, please," Brett cut in, looking at the crowd with a pained expression. "Do not do this here. We talked about your memory lapses." "I am not having memory lapses. Brett." "You forged my signature," I shouted. The room went deadly silent, but instead of shock at his accusation, I saw pity directed at me. Brett had set the stage perfectly. I was the hysterical, unstable wife. He was the saintly husband bearing the burden. 2 uniformed security guards materialized at my elbows. They were not asking me to leave. They were corralling me. "Let's get you some air, Mrs. Halstead," one guard muttered. gripping my arm. "Get off me!" I snapped. Lorraine was standing near the buffet table. She raised her champagne glass slightly, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. Her eyes said everything. "It is time." I struggled, planting my feet, but Brett leaned in close, pretending to hug me goodbye. His breath was hot against my ear, and the facade dropped completely. "Keep screaming, Sloane," he whispered, his voice vibrating with malice. "The more you talk, the more they believe you are losing your mind. You are making this so easy for me." The guards began to drag me toward the double doors. I was humiliated, stripped of my dignity in front of the entire town. I was being thrown out of my life. Just as they pushed me toward the lobby, the house lights in the ballroom flickered violently. A low hum of confusion swept through the guests. Suddenly, the massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been cycling through charity logos, turned bright red. An automated alert from the smart home system overrode the feed. "Emergency alert, critical electrical overload detected at Halstead residence." The text pulsed on the screen, huge and undeniable. I froze, looking back at the stage. The crowd gasped, turning to look at Brett. He stood under the red glow of the screen. He was not reaching for his phone to call the fire department. He was not looking at me with worry. He was staring at the alert with a calm, terrifying satisfaction. He looked like a man who had just watched a bomb detonate exactly when he pressed the button. The cold night air in the parking lot bit through my thin silk dress, but I hardly felt it. I was numb, standing by the curb where the security guards had dumped me like unwanted trash. Then, the gravel crunched softly. A black sedan rolled toward me. It did not speed, and it did not honk. It moved with the heavy, silent authority of a predator that knows it has no natural enemies. The car stopped right in front of me, and the rear door opened. A man stepped out. He was in his late 60s, dressed in a charcoal wool coat that looked like it cost more than Brett's entire wardrobe. He had silver hair and eyes that were hard, dark, and utterly unamused. He was flanked by a woman in a sharp suit with wire-rimmed glasses and a younger man carrying a hard-shell pelican case. The older man looked straight at me, ignoring the chaos of the party behind us. "Do not go back into that house." "Sloane," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made my knees lock. "They are waiting for it to explode. At least, they are waiting for it to explode on paper." Before I could ask who he was, the double doors of the yacht hall burst open. Brett came jogging out, breathless, fixing his tie. He must have seen the car from the window. His face transformed instantly from arrogance to a sickening, oily servility. "Mr. Kincaid," Brett called out, extending a hand as he rushed forward. "What an honor. I had no idea you were in Bracken Cove. If I had known, I would have sent a formal invitation to the gala. My wife and I are huge admirers of your stop," the man said. He did not raise his voice. He simply held up one hand, and Brett froze mid-step as if he had run into a glass wall. The man, Calder Kincaid, looked at my husband with an expression of profound disgust. "Do not speak to me," Calder said. "You are a forger and a contract arsonist. You are not a businessman." Brett's smile faltered, twitching at the corners. I think there is a misunderstanding. Sir, I am a partner at Ridgevale Meridian. We know what you manage." The woman with the glasses cut in. Her tone was clinical. "I am the lead auditor for the Risk Management Division. We have been tracking a series of unauthorized microtransfers regarding the Mercer Kincaid Trust for 6 months. We finally traced the endpoint IP address to your residence." The younger man opened the hard case and pulled out a ruggedized tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it toward Brett. "This is a mirror of your home automation server," the technician said. "You can see the log right here. The induction cooktop safety protocol was disabled manually, and at 1:58 in the morning, A corrupted firmware packet was uploaded to the device control board. That is not a malfunction. That is a command to overheat. Brett stared at the screen. His face went gray. This is illegal, Brett stammered, his voice climbing an octave. You hacked my house. This is inadmissible. I will call the police. We already did, Calder said calmly. They are 2 minutes away. And they are bringing a preservation order for the entire property. Someone sent them a very detailed tip about an imminent insurance fraud scheme involving a staged electrical fire scheduled for tonight. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with every second. Brett looked around wildly, realizing the trap had snapped shut on his own leg. I looked at Calder, my mind racing. I had never met this man. I had never heard his voice. Yet he had stepped out of the darkness to save my life. Why, I asked, my voice shaking. Why are you helping me? Calder turned back to me. His hard eyes softened, just for a fraction of a second. Because you are the remainder of a promise, he said quietly. A promise your mother did not want to mention, but one I intend to keep. Behind us, the doors opened again. Lorraine stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. She looked annoyed, likely coming to fetch Brett to finish his performance. Brett, honestly, what is taking? So, she stopped. She saw the black car. Then she saw Calder Kincaid standing under the halogen street lamp. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse standing upright. Her hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls. Calder, she whispered, the name sounding like a curse. Oh my God, no. Calder brought me to a guest house near the reservoir, a structure of glass and timber hidden deep within the pines. It was not far from Bracken Cove, but the silence here felt different. It was the silence of a fortress. Strategic silence. Sloane, Calder said, pouring tea into a ceramic cup. That is the first rule. Let him panic. Let him wonder where you are. When a man like Brett loses control of his narrative, he starts making mistakes. I spent the next morning at the dining table, which was now covered in my own life's paperwork. Nora Penn, the sharp-eyed advisor, sat across from me. She was teaching me how to read what I had actually signed. We went through digital contracts, tax returns, and liability waivers. Look at the timestamps on these access logs, Nora said, tapping the screen of her laptop. 11:45 at night, 12:30 in the morning, 1:15 in the morning. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. He always brought me papers when I was half asleep. I said, my voice barely a whisper. He would wait until I had worked a 10-hour shift, or until I had taken a sleeping pill. He would say it was urgent tax stuff. I was too tired to read the fine print. He did not beat you with fists, Sloane, Nora said, her voice firm but not unkind. He beat you with fatigue. He weaponized your exhaustion. We began to build a timeline. It was a grid of horror. Nora helped me map it out. Every time the internet went down at the house, every time the smart thermostat glitched, or every time Brett insisted on fixing a breaker, it aligned perfectly with a financial transfer or a policy amendment. The young technical expert, whose name was Eris, walked in carrying a dusty plastic box. It was the old router I had replaced 6 months ago, but had hidden in the back of the linen closet because I hated throwing away electronics. I pulled the history from the flash memory, Eris said, plugging it into his rig. Got him. A device with a MAC address ending in F4 connected to this network 6 months ago. The serial number matches the override chip we pulled from your stove last night. He has been testing the surge protocols for half a year. I stared at the black box. Brett had been rehearsing my death while I was cooking dinner in the same room. Suddenly, Nora's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, frowned, and then a small, cold smile touched her lips. Well, she said, it seems the rats are abandoning the ship. I just received an encrypted message from a burner number. The syntax and the specific legal phrasing suggest it is Miles Quaid. Brett's lawyer, I asked. He says to check the life insurance rider again. Nora read from the screen. He says, they did not just increase the payout. Look at the beneficiary designation. She pulled up the file. We looked at the clause together. The primary beneficiary had been changed from spouse to trustee of the estate, effective immediately upon the insured's incapacitation or death. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He does not just want the house money, I said, my hands gripping the edge of the table. If the house burns down and I die, he gets the trust. But even if I survive and I am declared mentally unstable because of the stress he has been faking, he gets power of attorney. He gets control of the Mercer-Kincaid Trust. Exactly, Nora said. He wants to be the conservator of your fortune. He wants to be your jailer. She closed the laptop with a snap. We are not going to the press. We are not going to give him a public fight that he can spin. We are going to file a lethal package of forensic and financial evidence with the state insurance board and the district attorney. We will strike once, and we will strike to kill. We spent the afternoon rehearsing. I had to learn how to talk to him again. I had to unlearn the submission. Do not accuse him, Nora instructed, acting out the scene. Ask questions that force him to lie. Men like Brett are arrogant. If you act broken, he will feel safe enough to brag. I practiced the lines. I just want this to be over, I said to the empty room, trying to make my voice sound small and trembling. I am so confused. Brett, help me understand. That evening, Calder walked into the room. He held a piece of paper in his hand. It was a photocopy of a handwritten letter. Your mother wrote this to me a week before she died, Calder said, handing it to me. She knew she was in danger, even if she could not prove it. I looked at the familiar, looping handwriting. Tears pricked my eyes. I read the final paragraph. If my daughter ever appears, please do not let her be used as an asset. She is soft-hearted, Calder, and the wolves will smell it. I touched the ink on the page. My mother had known. She had sent help from the grave. I am not soft-hearted anymore, I said, looking up at Calder. No, he replied, his dark eyes proud. You are not. Nora sent the message through a back channel that Miles Quaid monitored. It was brief and pathetic, exactly the kind of surrender a man like Brett would expect. It read simply that I was hysterical, terrified of a legal battle, and willing to sign a quiet exit agreement in exchange for immediate peace. Brett took the bait instantly. He set the meeting for the Riverside Grand Hotel, in a private conference room on the basement level. He demanded absolute privacy. No lawyers, no family. Just husband and wife. I walked into the room 10 minutes late. I wore an old gray cardigan and no makeup, letting the dark circles under my eyes stand out. I clutched a battered notebook to my chest like a shield. Brett was already at the head of the long mahogany table. He looked annoyed, checking his watch, but when he saw me, his expression softened into that familiar, condescending pity. Sloan, thank God, Brett said, standing up and walking around the table. I have been so worried. Are you okay? You look dreadful. I just want it to stop. Brett, I whispered, staring at the floor. I can't handle the police. I can't handle the shouting. I know, babe, I know, he said, pulling out a chair for me. I am trying to fix this. I only ever wanted to protect you. That is why I was working on the stove. I knew the wiring was bad. I didn't want you to get hurt in a fire. I sat down, keeping my hands hidden under the table so he would not see that they were perfectly steady. But, I asked softly, looking up at him with wide, confused eyes, if it was dangerous, why did you take it apart at 3 a.m? Why not call a professional? Brett sighed, sitting close to me, because professionals take days. Sloan, and I had to make sure it was done before the insurance policy rollover. I mean, before the morning rush. I just wanted it safe for you. He had slipped. It was tiny, but it was there. He reached into his briefcase and slid a single document toward me. "This is the only way out. Sloan," he said. "It is a temporary guardianship agreement. You sign this, granting me control over your finances for 6 months while you get treatment. In exchange, I will deposit $75,000 into a private account for you to use however you want. You can go to a spa. You can travel. You just need to sign here and admit that the stress caused you to hallucinate the events of the last few days." I looked at the paper. It was a confession disguised as a contract. $75,000, I repeated. That is a lot of money. "It is enough to start over," Brett urged. "Just sign it." I leaned forward. "But what about the chip?" "Brett. The firmware update at 2 in the morning. How do I explain that Brett's patience snapped?" He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Nobody cares about a chip." "Sloan, you don't get it. If that stove had sparked the way it was supposed to, there wouldn't be a chip. There wouldn't be a house." Do you have any idea how hot an electrical fire burns? It erases everything. It erases the house. And it erases your little story." The door to the conference room opened. Brett spun around, furious. "I said no interruptions," he shouted. Miles Quaid walked in. He did not look at Brett. He looked straight at me, his face pale and sweating. He placed a manila envelope on the table. "Miles, what the hell are you doing?" Brett demanded. "I am cutting my losses." "Brett," Miles said, his voice shaking slightly. "I received a subpoena this morning. I am not going to prison for you." He tapped the envelope. "This contains the email chain from your mother, specifically the one from yesterday where she told you that tonight is the golden night." She knew the fire was scheduled. Brett stood up so fast his chair crashed backward. The mask of the loving husband disintegrated. His face twisted into a snarl of pure, unfiltered hatred. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the water pitcher jump. "You coward," Brett screamed at Miles. Then he turned on me. "And you useless, pathetic little thing. You were supposed to be easy. You were a failed investment from the start. I should have let you rot in that house." The air in the room went still. "Thank you." "Brett." Nora's voice came clearly through the speakerphone system that sat in the center of the table. "That admission has been recorded and live-streamed to the district attorney's office." Brett froze. He looked at the speakerphone, then at me. I finally looked him in the eye, and I let myself smile. It was not a nice smile. "I am not the investment." "Brett," I said calmly, "I am the audit." The emergency hearing was held in a small, sterile courtroom that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The air was so tight it felt like a physical weight. Brett sat on the left side, flanked by 3 new lawyers in sharp, expensive suits. They looked like sharks circling a drop of blood. Their strategy was obvious from the first sentence. They were painting me as a fragile, hysterical woman who had snapped under the pressure of a lifestyle she could not handle. "Your Honor," Brett's lead counsel said, smoothing his tie, "Mrs. Halstead has a history of emotional episodes. This entire scenario is a fabrication born of a paranoid mind, but we did not bring stories. We brought data." The independent electrician, Miller, took the stand first. He projected the schematic of our kitchen cooktop onto the main screen. The lines were stark and undeniable. "This is not a repair," Miller said, pointing to a red bridge wire on the diagram. "This is an ignition switch. It bypasses the thermal fuse. The moment the burner hits 400 degrees, the safety fails. It just keeps getting hotter until the insulation melts and the wall catches. It was designed to look like a failure, but it is a bomb." Next came the digital evidence. The technical expert overlaid the router logs with the smart meter data. The timestamps matched perfectly. The firmware upload happened at 1:58 in the morning. The recovery email for the bank account was changed from a device with a local IP address. The forensic accountant testified. "That device is registered as Brett's iPad Pro. The change occurred inside the master bedroom while Mrs. Halstead was verifiably asleep. The user also accessed the term life insurance policy 3 minutes later. Brett shifted in his seat. He was starting to sweat, but the real blow came when Miles Quaid took the stand. He looked small and gray, a man trading his career for his freedom. Mrs. Halstead. I mean, the elder. Mrs. Halstead, Lorraine. She instructed me to expedite the insurance claim. Miles stammered, avoiding Brett's gaze. She told me to prepare the unstable wife narrative weeks ago. She said we needed to control the story before the fire happened. Brett slammed his hand on the table, standing up. She is lying. They are all lying. Sloane planted that chip. She is trying to blackmail me because I wanted a divorce. Nora did not argue. She simply pressed a button on her laptop. On the large screen, a video file began to play. It was grainy. Black and white footage from the battery-operated nursery camera I had hidden behind the spice rack 3 days ago. The courtroom watched in silence as Brett appeared on screen. He was wearing the blue nitrile gloves. He held the green microchip up to the light, inspecting it. He looked at the camera lens, not knowing it was recording, smiled a cold, dead smile, and whispered, "Burn bright, baby. Daddy needs a payday." The video froze on his smiling face. Brett sank back into his chair, his face the color of ash. Then, Calder's lawyer stepped forward, holding a thick, sealed file. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "We are introducing evidence regarding the Mercer-Kincaid Trust. Mr. Halstead was not just targeting the house insurance. He was targeting the beneficiary rights to a portfolio worth $50 million. The judge frowned, looking over his spectacles. He turned to look at Calder, who was sitting in the back row like a stone statue. "Mr. Kincaid?" the judge asked. "You are a third party here. What is your standing? What is your relationship to the plaintiff?" The room went deadly quiet. Lorraine, sitting behind Brett, let out a small, strangled gasp. She grabbed the back of the bench in front of her, her knuckles white. Calder stood up. He did not look at the judge. He looked straight at Brett, his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying fire. "She is not just a plaintiff," Calder said, his voice deep and resonating off the walls. "Sloane is my daughter." The words fell like a hammer. The silence shattered. Brett stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, unable to form words. The realization washed over him. He had not just tried to kill a lonely orphan with no connections. He had tried to murder the heir to an empire. "Order," the judge shouted, banging his gavel as the gallery erupted. "I am freezing all assets immediately. Bailiff, remand Mr. Halstead into custody pending a criminal inquiry into attempted murder and fraud." Brett looked at me one last time as the bailiff moved toward him. There was no arrogance left, only the terrified look of a predator who realized he had walked into the cage of something much, much bigger. The morning of the final verdict, the prosecutor walked in not with a folder, but with a hammer. He presented a new chain of emails that had been recovered from a deleted server. It turned out Brett had not just hoped for a fire. He had scheduled it. He had contacted a private appraisal firm, one known for being friendly to insurance adjusters, exactly 7 days before the stove was tampered with. The subject line of the email was post-fire structural assessment, and the date for the appointment was set for tomorrow. He had booked the cleanup before he even lit the match. Lorraine was not spared either. The prosecution displayed a text message she had sent to Brett the night of the gala. It read, "Make sure she looks completely out of control tonight so the medical papers will be clean. We cannot afford a contested signature." The gasp in the courtroom was audible. Lorraine sat frozen, her face draining of color as the judge read the charges of conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. During the recess, just before the final sentencing, I saw Brett in the hallway. He was not wearing his expensive watch anymore, and his tie was crooked. He broke away from his legal team and rushed toward me, his eyes wide and wet with panic. "Sloan, please, tell them to stop," he begged, his voice cracking. "Tell them it is a misunderstanding. I never wanted to hurt you. I got in over my head." I looked at him, and I felt absolutely nothing. The fear was gone. The love was gone. "You did not misunderstand anything, Brett," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You calculated. You did the math on my life, and you decided I was worth more dead than alive." The court reconvened 20 minutes later. The judge did not hesitate. He issued an immediate remand order for Brett Halstead on charges of insurance fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. He also announced a federal investigation into the financial practices of Ridgevale Meridian Partners. When the bailiffs moved in, the reality finally hit Brett. He struggled as they pulled his arms behind his back, the metallic click of the handcuffs echoing off the high ceiling. "No, you cannot do this." Brett screamed, thrashing as they dragged him toward the side door. He looked back at me, his face twisted. "I am her husband. I am her husband." I stood up. I did not shout. I did not cry. I spoke clearly enough for him to hear me one last time. "You are not my husband," I said. "You are just a man who used love as a tool." When the doors swung shut, the silence in the room was heavy. Calder Kincaid stepped up beside me. He did not hug me or try to claim me. He stood at a respectful distance, his hands clasped behind his back. "If you want to vanish from all of this," Calder said softly, "you have the right. I can make sure nobody ever finds you again." I looked at him. "No, I am done hiding. I did not go back to the house to live." I instructed the lawyers to sell the property immediately, fully furnished, and to liquidate every asset Brett had tried to steal. I directed every cent of the proceeds to establish a permanent scholarship at Northkite Insights Lab, specifically for young analysts from working-class families. Outside the courtroom, Nora handed me a thick, clean file. Inside was my new birth certificate, the restored access to the Mercer Kincaid Trust, and a data protection guarantee. For the first time, I was holding my own life in my hands, and I understood every page. Before I left town, I went back to the house one last time. The police tape had been cut. I walked into the kitchen. It was cold and smelled of stale air. I looked at the cooktop, which sat dark and lifeless. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the little green microchip the electrician had given me. I dropped it into a plastic evidence bag and sealed it. Then, I reached out and flipped the light switch off. The room plunged into darkness, but my heart did not race. I was not afraid of the dark anymore. I knew exactly what was in it. I walked out onto the courthouse steps where the sun was hitting the pavement. My throat was dry. I took a bottle of water from my bag and took a long, slow swallow. It tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. I capped the bottle, walked down the stairs, and stepped onto the sidewalk without asking anyone for permission. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button so we can get this story heard by even more people.